This is number 51. At least that's what they called her when she was sold to an infamous factory in Thailand called the Gig Peeling Shed. She spent 16 hours a day ripping the heads and shells off shrimp, alongside other children so small they stood on stools just to reach the peeling table. In 2015, the world discovered that the global shrimp trade's biggest powerhouse was built on slavery, child labor, and human trafficking.
Prepared in Thailand by slave labor, including children.
The workers are not identified by names, just numbers.
The minute you hear someone's passport has been taken away, it's slave labor.
But that was 10 years ago, and the shrimp industry has undergone a thorough rebranding. Sustainable, ethical. This is now the happy protein. There's just one problem. None of this is true. Over the past few months, I've traced the modern shrimp supply chain, and what I found is that 2015 wasn't the end of the story. Slavery, organized crime, radioactive shrimp, and ecological collapse. It was just the beginning. After the slavery scandal, there was reform in Thailand. The government tried to regulate the industry, but this increased the price of the shrimp, and so Western importers started looking elsewhere. India quickly became America's largest supplier. But there's a reason why India can make such cheap shrimp. The workers are mostly made up of India's lowest status castes and indigenous tribes. A 2024 report found that they're being offered work by recruiters who then loan them large sums of money to pay for the recruitment fee. This loan then becomes a trap. They're unable to leave until their debt is paid, which can take years. They spend their days peeling shrimp in temperatures so cold that frostbite is a common problem. Many workers have their housing tied to their employment, are kept under guarded surveillance, and rarely allowed to leave. And on top of all of this, an independent human rights assessment found reports of violence and sexual harassment, with workers feeling unsafe, specifically in the dormitories.
వాళ్ళ పిల్లలకి జ్వరం అయితే హాస్పిటల్ తీసుకెళ్ళినా కూడా డబ్బులు ఉండలేదండి చాలా ఇబ్బంది పడిపోతున్నామండి.
The shrimp supply chain is complex, with the shrimp passing between multiple owners of hatcheries, shrimp farms, peeling sheds, and processing plants, with different middlemen known as agents involved between these stages, which makes it hard to trace where exactly any specific shrimp has come from. The report goes on to state that standards from ethical certification schemes aren't enforced and serve simply as protection for companies and marketing for ethically minded consumers. But India wasn't the only country to rapidly expand its shrimp production after Thailand's fall. The other key player is Ecuador. The US Department of State's human trafficking report found that Ecuadorian men, women, and children are exploited in sex trafficking and forced labor in several industries, including shrimp farming. But compared to India, Ecuador is a bit of a black box in terms of the working conditions. We're not really sure quite what's going on there. I did manage to find testimony from one woman working in shrimp processing. It doesn't offer much in terms of detail. She said, "It's not a job that allows us to live, but only survive." But one thing that does separate India from Ecuador is its problem with organized crime. Drug trafficking groups have reportedly turned the export of shrimp into a smuggling channel. One shrimp farmer said, "Every transaction we make carries risks. We are not just farming shrimp, we are also negotiating with criminal groups to survive." Most Ecuadorian shrimp farmers are being extorted by criminal gangs under threats of violence. But there isn't only a conflict between farmers and gangs, there's also a battle between farmers and local communities. And to understand this, we need to understand another overlooked problem with shrimp farming. Mangroves are these coastal forests that essentially act as nurseries for a whole host of underwater species. I mean, they contain entire ecosystems. And mangroves hold up to 5 times more carbon per hectare than tropical rainforests, so they play a crucial role in fighting climate change. They have these tangled roots that act as natural barriers protecting local communities from extreme weather events. In fact, local communities have relied on the mangroves for centuries. But shrimp farms are now the biggest threat to the mangrove forests, rapidly replacing them and displacing the people who relied on them. More than 70% of the mangrove ecosystem in Ecuador has been destroyed by shrimp farms. In India, nearly half of all mangroves have been lost. Shrimp farming has been estimated to be 10 times worse for the climate than beef. As well as the deforestation, the shrimp farms have been polluting the waters with fertilizers, antibiotics, and disinfectants, contaminating the ecosystems in the forests that are left.
Ya no, por el motivo de las camaroneras no. Mire que está cerradito y no encuentra creo mucho aquí por aquí ahorita. Por el motivo de las camaroneras ahorita. Que había bastante. Había más mangle ahorita, ahorita ya no hay, poco.
Esta comunidad era netamente recolectoras de conchas y pescadores artesanales, siendo a medida de que la frontera de los camaroneros se fue expandiendo.
As shrimp farming rapidly expands and displaces the mangroves and the other forms of agriculture like rice paddies, local people lose their ability to sustain themselves and have no other option other than to join the shrimp workforce. The shrimp industry destroys local communities, pollutes their water, and then exploits these same people as workers. And as if all of this wasn't bad enough, there's also the animal cruelty perspective. When we think of animal welfare or animal rights, we typically think of land animals like chickens and pigs, but shrimp are the most farmed animal on Earth. They dwarf the number of chickens being killed. There are roughly 440 billion shrimp being farmed every year. I mean, that's more than the total number of humans who have ever lived. And if you include the wild-caught shrimp, that's like another 25 trillion. Who the fuck is eating all of this shrimp? Now, perhaps when I talk about animal welfare and shrimp, you're like, come on, it's a fucking prawn.
I mean, you can't say they don't look like that. That's what they look like, right? They look like prawns.
And I get that reaction. You know, we didn't evolve to feel empathy for animals who look so incredibly alien to us. So in a sense, it actually feels quite impressive that some people do have empathy for creatures like this, given our evolutionary history. However, if there is someone in there experiencing something, then obviously that experience matters. We don't want them to suffer if they don't have to. And research shows that shrimp have nociceptors, the nerve endings used to send pain signals. They show protective behaviours like rubbing their eye stalks when an irritant has been put on it, and applying local anaesthetics reduces those pain-like behaviours. This is just some of the evidence that led the UK government to categorising shrimps as sentient in law. Okay, but even if shrimps are capable of feeling pain and suffering, that doesn't necessarily mean that farming them causes large amounts of pain and suffering, right? Well, it turns out they're cutting their fucking eyes off. Somehow they worked out that if you take a female shrimp and cut off one of their eyes, they produce more eggs. So yeah, it is standard practice for them to cut off or crush the female shrimp's eyes. This industry is so fucked up. There's no regulation in shrimp farming. The stocking densities are so incredibly high. I mean, they are just cramming thousands of these animals into these ponds to the point where disease and cannibalism is rampant. And because the shrimps are creating so much waste in these ponds, there's a toxic buildup of ammonia that literally corrodes their bodies. Might I add that ammonia is then dumped into the waters that local communities rely on. And the high stocking densities and the buildup of waste also depletes oxygen levels in the water. So while from above a shrimp pond might look fairly tranquil, underneath it turns out that the animals might be constantly struggling to breathe. Look, shrimp farms are a toxic mess, and this is why there is a mortality rate of around 50%. 50% of the shrimps are dying before they get to slaughter age. What the fuck? So to try and reduce the mortality rates, they pump these ponds full of antibiotics. But this then means that shrimp ponds become breeding grounds for antibiotic-resistant bacteria. India and Vietnam have both been found to have extremely high antibiotic use in shrimp farming, and in Ecuador, they've already found antibiotic-resistant shrimp. The lack of regulation and oversight is a problem across Asia and Latin America. Earlier this year, it was found that thousands of Indonesian shrimps entering America are literally radioactive, which means that long-term consumption would increase risk of cancer. The shrimp were found to contain radioactive cesium-137, the same isotope released in nuclear accidents. It's been traced back to a metal scrapyard near Jakarta. The radiation likely became airborne, and the site was less than 2 kilometers away from a shrimp processing plant. As a result, thousands of shrimp in the US have been recalled. Anyway, back to the farms, because the shrimp that manage to survive these toxic pools are then taken out of the ponds, put into boxes, and simply left to die of suffocation, which can take over an hour. As I've been doing the research for this video, I've really been getting a sense of like the scale and the breadth of the problems associated with the shrimp industry. And honestly, it can feel a bit overwhelming. So I also wanted to spend some time thinking about what I, as an individual, can do to try and address this problem. And I think there are at least 3 things I can do going forward. The first thing isn't really an action, it's more of an inaction. I can decide to boycott the shrimp products. The choices I make do have outcomes, whether I see them or not. And so avoiding buying shrimp is one simple thing I can do. In terms of like the animal suffering aspect of it, there's also this amazing charity called Shrimp Welfare Project. They're incredibly cost effective because there's so many animals being farmed. They can make a really big difference. So another clear thing I can do is set up a monthly donation to the Shrimp Welfare Project. And I like to think this isn't because I saw videos of shrimp swimming and they do these doggy paddle swims like dogs. I mean, if you can manage to empathize with these animals a little bit, it's really quite horrific what's happening to them. And the third obvious thing that I think I can do is to talk about it, which is obviously what I'm trying to do right now. Given all of the human suffering, the animal suffering, and the ecological problems associated with the shrimp industry, it really isn't being talked about much at all. Since the unraveling of Thailand's slave workforce, the shrimp industry has, for the most part, managed to go under the radar while trying to position themselves as ethical and sustainable. But if you're going to try and market yourself as the happy protein, I have to ask, who is this happy for? It's not happy for the workers who are spending their lives being objectified as shrimp peeling machines trapped by debt. It's not happy for the planet as mangrove ecosystems continue to be destroyed. It's not happy for the animals who are having their eyes cut off. The shrimp industry is a moral disaster in so many ways. This isn't a story of reform. It's a story of relocation and rebranding.